She didn't realize her husband was watching her throat until she stopped swallowing. Every night he stood there with that calm smile, waiting for the pill to go down her throat, waiting for her memories to fade, waiting for her to become quiet again. The headaches weren't stress, the confusion wasn't anxiety, and the nights she couldn't remember weren't sleep, because the night she pretended to swallow the pill, she stayed awake long enough to see what he did next. And what she discovered wasn't about love or care or concern. It was about control. And she wasn't the first. Before we continue, take a moment and tell us, what time is it where you are watching from, and where in the world are you listening? And if you enjoy intense, true-to-life stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and get comfortable, because this story only gets darker from here. Lena Moore swallowed the pill because Grant was watching her throat. She lifted the glass of water with steady hands, tilted her head back just enough, and felt the chalky tablet slide onto her tongue. Grant stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded loosely, his posture relaxed, in the way people got when they were certain of an outcome. His eyes never left her neck. She swallowed. At least that's what it looked like. "Good," Grant said softly, the word landing like a seal of approval. "You'll sleep better tonight." Lena lowered the glass and offered a small smile. She had practiced it in the bathroom mirror earlier, tired, grateful, compliant, the kind of smile that made people stop asking questions. Grant reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, affectionate even, but Lena felt her stomach tighten anyway. She hated that her body reacted before her mind could catch up. "You've been pushing yourself again," he added, his voice warm. "I don't want you getting overwhelmed." "I know," Lena said. "I'm fine." Grant nodded, as if that settled it. He turned off the bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and climbed into bed beside her. The mattress dipped under his weight. Within minutes, his breathing slowed into the deep, even rhythm of someone who believed the night was under control. Lena lay still. The pill rested beneath her tongue, pressed flat against the inside of her cheek. It tasted bitter, metallic. Nothing like the vitamins she'd taken back when sleep had come naturally. She focused on breathing through her nose, on keeping her jaw relaxed, on not swallowing, no matter how badly her mouth wanted to. This was the first night she hadn't taken it. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure Grant could hear it. She counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3. When they deepened, when the pauses between them stretched longer, she let her eyelids flutter and her body go loose, the way she always did when the medication took over. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, Grant shifted. Lena's pulse jumped, but she didn't move. She kept her face slack, her breathing slow. The mattress creaked softly as Grant sat up. She felt the absence of his warmth when he swung his legs over the side of the bed. The bedroom door opened and closed with a careful click. Lena waited. She counted silently, the numbers steadying her nerves. 10, 20, 30. The house settled into its nighttime stillness, the faint hum of the air system filling the silence. She thought maybe that was it, that she had worked herself into this for nothing. Then she heard footsteps returning, slow, deliberate, too quiet for someone who thought they were alone. Grant stopped just inside the doorway. Lena felt his presence like a weight in the air, even with her eyes closed. She sensed him watching her, studying the rise and fall of her chest. He moved closer. The mattress dipped again as he leaned over her. Lena fought the instinct to flinch when his shadow crossed her face. She focused on the rhythm of her breathing, on the cool sheet beneath her fingers. Grant's hand brushed her wrist, not affectionate, not accidental. He pressed 2 fingers lightly against her pulse and held them there. 1 second, 2, 3, long enough to be certain. Out, he murmured to himself. Lena's stomach twisted. Grant straightened, his movements efficient now, stripped of the tenderness he wore during the day. He stepped back, and she heard the soft scrape of the nightstand drawer opening. Something inside clinked quietly, metal against glass. Her mind raced. She had imagined this moment 100 different ways, but none of them had prepared her for how calm he sounded, how normal this felt to him. "She won't remember," Grant said under his breath. The words slid into the dark like a blade. Lena's breath nearly caught, but she forced it down, forced her body to stay loose. She felt him pause, as if listening for any change in her breathing. When none came, he exhaled and moved away again. The drawer closed. Grant left the room. Lena lay there long after, her muscles aching from the effort of stillness, her thoughts crashing into one another. She didn't know how long it took before she dared to move. When she finally did, it was only to carefully work the pill from her mouth and tuck it into her palm. Her hand was shaking. She slipped out of bed and padded to the bathroom, locking the door behind her with a soft click. Under the harsh white light, the pill looked harmless. Small. Ordinary. The kind of thing people took without a second thought. Lena stared at it, her reflection pale in the mirror. She had believed Grant when he said it was to help her sleep. She had believed him when he said her headaches were stress, her memory lapses, anxiety. She had believed him when he told her she'd always been forgetful, that she just didn't notice before. But she remembered this. She remembered his fingers on her wrist, his voice in the dark. She won't remember. Lena wrapped the pill in a tissue and hid it deep in the bottom of her makeup bag. Her mind raced ahead, piecing together moments she had brushed aside for months, the misplaced objects, the conversations she couldn't recall, the way Grant always seemed 1 step ahead of her confusion. She slipped back into bed before he returned, forcing her body to relax again, rehearsing sleep. When Grant finally came back hours later, he didn't touch her. He didn't whisper. He simply lay down and slept. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. Grant was already dressed when Lena woke, buttoning his cufflinks with precise movements. "Morning," he said casually. "Morning," Lena replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You slept through the night," Grant added, glancing at her in the mirror. "I checked on you. You were out cold." Lena swallowed. "I guess the pills are working." Grant smiled, satisfied. "I told you." He kissed her forehead and left for work, the door clicking shut behind him. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, long after he was gone, the quiet pressing in around her. Her heart was still racing, but beneath the fear, something else had taken shape. Clarity. She wasn't sick. She was being managed, and now that she knew, she had to be careful. Very careful, because Grant believed she would forget. Lena spent the day pretending everything was normal. She answered emails, watered the plants Grant insisted made the house feel calmer, and folded laundry she didn't remember wearing. Every small task felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move, one question asked too soon, and Grant would notice, and noticing was dangerous. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed with a message from him. "Did you eat breakfast?" She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering before she typed back. "Yes, toast and coffee." But that was a lie. The thought of eating made her stomach churn. Good, Grant replied almost instantly. Headache? There it was. The routine check-in disguised as concern. Not really, she typed. Feeling okay. Another lie. Lena set the phone down and closed her eyes. Since the night before, memories had started lining up differently, like puzzle pieces finally turned the right way. Grant's reminders, his gentle corrections, the way he spoke about her to others like she wasn't fully present. Her phone buzzed again. Try to rest today. Stress makes things worse. Worse. He never said better. Only worse. Lena stood and walked through the house, paying attention now in a way she hadn't before. The Ridgewood estate was beautiful. High ceilings, wide windows, quiet hallways that swallowed sound. Grant loved the privacy. He said it helped her anxiety. She stopped in the living room and frowned. The throw pillow on the sofa was upside down. It was a small thing, insignificant on its own, but Lena always placed it a certain way. She liked the seam hidden. She knew that about herself, or at least she used to. Her pulse quickened. She moved through the room slowly, opening drawers, scanning surfaces. Nothing was overtly wrong, but the wrongness hummed beneath everything. The remote control sat on the coffee table instead of the side tray. A book she'd been reading was back on the shelf. Someone had been resetting her life. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Grant. It was Noah. You okay? The message read. Lena stared at it. Noah rarely texted her directly. He was Grant's younger brother, less polished, more blunt, the kind of man who never quite fit into the Blackwell family image. I think so, she replied carefully. Why? There was a pause, longer than usual. Just checking, Noah wrote. Grant mentioned you'd been having a rough time. Her jaw tightened. Did he? Another pause. Yeah. He's worried. Lena's fingers trembled as she typed back. About what? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Memory stuff. Stress. He said you've been forgetting conversations. Lena closed her eyes. Did I tell you that? She asked. This time the pause stretched longer. No, Noah finally wrote. He did. Lena's heart pounded. Grant was narrating her life for other people, filling in gaps with his version of her reality. I don't think I'm forgetting things, she typed. I think something else is going on. The reply came quickly. B.
Carefully verify that the target's real before he fires in combat with adrenaline running. Morrison studied the map, but Kowalski could see he wasn't really looking at it. He was calculating, counting the cost. How many dummies would you need? Morrison asked. 3 minimum. 5 would be better. How long to build them? Give me 4 hours and 3 men. We've got the materials. Uniforms from the casualties, straw from that barn we passed yesterday, rope from the supply depot Harper cut in. And if it doesn't work, if the gunner sees through it, then we're exactly where we are now, Kowalski said flatly. Pinned down, bleeding men, and no closer to that road junction. But if it does work, if we can make him burn his ammunition on Ghost, we might save 40 lives. Morrison looked at Harper. Your platoon's next in the rotation. Harper's jaw tightened. Sir, this is not a democracy, Lieutenant. Sergeant Kowalski's plan is unorthodox, but so is sending my men into a meat grinder for the 5th straight day. He turned back to Kowalski. You've got your 4 hours. Pick your men. If this works, I'll write you up for a commendation. If it fails, you can bury me with the scarecrows, sir. Morrison didn't smile. Dismissed. Kowalski walked back through the forest, his mind already assembling the pieces. He'd need Private First Class Luca, smart kid, good with his hands, kept calm under pressure, and Corporal Chen, the former engineering student who understood angles and sight lines, and maybe Mendez if the kid had stopped shaking. Behind him, through the trees, the MG-42 fired another burst. Someone had been careless, shown themselves for just a moment. The gun hammered away for 7 seconds, 140 rounds, then fell silent. Kowalski counted the pause. 8 seconds. The crew was still sharp. He thought about Nebraska, about October mornings, walking the corn rows, checking the scarecrows, adjusting their positions. His father had taught him the trick. It wasn't about making them look human. It was about making them move like a threat. The crows didn't need to believe. They just needed to hesitate, to stay uncertain long enough to leave the crop alone. The Germans would hesitate too. Kowalski was betting his life on it. And maybe, if he was right, 40 other men would get to go home and plant their own crops next spring. American forward position, Holtzminden Forest, September 1944. The straw smelled like home, dry wheat chaff mixed with the mineral tang of French soil. Kowalski knelt beside the collapsed barn, pulling handfuls of it from beneath a collapsed rafter, stuffing it into empty sandbags. Behind him, Private First Class Luca and Corporal Chen worked in silence, their faces showing the careful blankness of men following orders they didn't quite believe in. "Sarge," Luca finally said, "you really think this is going to work?" Kowalski didn't look up. "I think it's better than walking into—"
And again, she didn't. She waited. She listened. She felt the shift when Grant believed she was gone. This time, she heard him on the phone in the hallway, his voice low. "She's declining faster than I expected," he said. "Yes, I know. I'm handling it." Lena's blood ran cold. "She won't remember this," Grant added quietly. "She never does." Lena stopped trusting the house after that night. It wasn't just the pills anymore. It was the way doors seemed to close too quietly, the way Grant always knew where she'd been, even when she hadn't told him, the way time felt slippery, like something she couldn't hold on to no matter how tightly she tried. The next morning, she found a mug in the sink she didn't remember using. It was her favorite one, the chipped blue ceramic with the thin crack along the rim. She always washed it immediately because the crack bothered her. Seeing it abandoned in the sink made her chest tighten. She picked it up slowly, turning it in her hands. "Did I drink this?" she whispered to the empty kitchen. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Morning," Grant had texted. "How's your head?" She stared at the screen, then typed back, "Fine." Another lie. Lena decided to test something small, harmless. She moved the mug to the far left corner of the counter, right next to the toaster. Then she took a picture of it with her phone and set the phone face down. If the mug moved, she'd know. By afternoon, the fog she usually felt was lighter. Not gone, but thinner, like a veil instead of a wall. She realized then how much the pills had been dulling her, not knocking her out, but softening the edges of everything until she stopped questioning. She walked into the kitchen around 3. The mug was gone. Her pulse spiked. She checked the cabinets, her movements growing frantic. Finally, she found it, washed, dried, and placed back in its usual spot. Her stomach dropped. Someone had noticed. She sat at the table, forcing herself to breathe slowly. Panic would only prove Grant right. She needed to stay calm, stay quiet. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a voicemail notification. Unknown number. Lena hesitated, then pressed play. "Check the pills," a woman's voice whispered. "He's done this before." The message ended abruptly. Lena stared at the phone, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. The voice had sounded strained, urgent, like someone who didn't have much time. She replayed it. Again and again. "He's done this before." That night, Grant came home earlier than usual. He kissed her cheek, his smile warm, his eyes sharp. "You seem quiet," he said. "Just tired," Lena replied. "You've been tired a lot lately." She shrugged, keeping her gaze on the stove. "I guess." Grant watched her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll get you back to normal." The words made her skin crawl. When he handed her the pill later, Lena took it with a smile that felt glued to her face. She swallowed water, lowered the glass, and lay back against the pillows. Her heart pounded as she tucked the pill beneath her tongue again. Grant didn't turn away immediately this time. He stood there, studying her face, her breathing, the way her eyes fluttered closed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," Lena murmured. He hesitated, then finally turned off the light. Minutes later, she heard him leave the room. This time, she didn't wait. As soon as the door closed, Lena slipped out of bed and padded silently toward Grant's office. Her bare feet barely made a sound on the carpet. The door was locked. She pressed her ear against it. Nothing. She returned to the bedroom, her mind racing. If there was proof, it wouldn't be in plain sight. Grant was too careful for that. She knelt by the nightstand and opened his drawer. Inside were ordinary things: his watch, spare cufflinks, receipts. She reached beneath them and felt something solid, a false bottom. Her breath caught. She pried it open and froze. Photos stared back at her. Dozens of them. Lena asleep, Lena on the bed, Lena on the couch. Different nights, different clothes, different angles. Her face slack, vulnerable, unaware. Her hands shook as she pushed the photos aside. Beneath them were papers, medical reports with her name typed neatly at the top, diagnoses she had never received, notes describing episodes, confusion, emotional instability. At the bottom of the stack was a legal document. Her signature was at the bottom, but it wasn't hers. A wave of nausea hit her so hard she had to grip the nightstand to stay upright. Grant had been building a case against her, documenting her disappearance from her own life. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Lena shoved everything back into the drawer, her movements frantic but careful. She closed it just as Grant's shadow appeared in the doorway. "Lena?" he called softly. She scrambled back into bed, heart hammering, and pulled the covers over herself. She slipped the pill from her mouth and hid it under the mattress. Grant stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "You're still awake," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she replied, her voice trembling despite her efforts. He nodded, his gaze flicking briefly to the nightstand. "I'll get you something stronger tomorrow." Her blood ran cold. Grant leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Try to rest." As he turned away, Lena noticed something new in his hand. A small syringe. She watched him leave the room, the door clicking shut behind him, and felt the last piece fall into place. This wasn't about sleep. This wasn't about care. This was about control. And if she didn't act soon, she wouldn't survive it. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay rigid on the mattress, staring into the darkness, listening to the faint sounds of the house, the hum of electricity in the walls, the whisper of the air vents, the distant click of Grant's office door opening and closing. Every sound felt amplified now, charged with meaning. The image of the syringe burned behind her eyes. She understood something then, with frightening clarity. Grant had been pacing this, measuring, waiting for the moment she became quiet enough, forgetful enough, compliant enough to move to the next step. By morning, her fear had sharpened into something colder. Resolve. Grant left early, as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't stood in the hallway holding a syringe while his wife pretended to sleep. He kissed her forehead, reminded her to eat, and told her he'd check in later. The moment the front door closed, Lena moved. She went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. Her hands trembled as she pulled the pill from where she'd hidden it and placed it on the counter beside a bottle of multivitamins she'd bought months ago and never opened. They were almost identical. She exhaled slowly and began swapping them, one by one, careful not to leave fingerprints, aligning the pills exactly as they'd been before. When she finished, she screwed the cap back on and placed the bottle precisely where Grant always left it. Then she sat on the floor and cried silently, her knees pulled to her chest. She didn't have the luxury of panic anymore. She needed proof, and she needed time. Her phone buzzed. "Lunch with Mum tonight," Grant texted. 6 p.m. Lena stared at the message. She hadn't agreed to that. She was sure of it. "Okay," she replied. The dinner was worse than she expected. Vivian's house was immaculate, every surface polished, every detail curated. Lena felt like an intruder in her own life, watching the woman she used to be sit at the table and smile politely. "You seem distracted," Vivian said, cutting into her food. "Are you feeling well?" "I'm fine," Lena replied. Grant sighed softly. "She's had a stressful few weeks." Vivian nodded knowingly. Stress can do terrible things to the mind. Lena's fork clattered against her plate. "Why do you keep talking about my mind?" Grant placed a hand on her arm. "Because we care." "You've been telling people I'm unstable," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant's grip tightened slightly. "Lower your voice." Vivian's eyes flicked between them. "Grant only wants to protect you." "From what?" Lena asked. "From yourself," the silence seemed to say. On the drive home, Grant didn't speak. His jaw was set, his focus fixed on the road. Lena stared out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. When they got home, Grant turned to her slowly. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said calmly. "I told the truth." "You imagined things," he corrected. "That's different." Something inside her snapped. "No," Lena said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I didn't." Grant studied her, his expression unreadable. "You're getting worse." He walked upstairs without another word. That night, when he handed her the pill, Lena felt his eyes on her more sharply than ever. She swallowed water, lowered the glass, and waited. Grant didn't leave right away. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. Minutes passed. Her muscles ached from the effort of staying still. Finally, he stood. Lena waited until she heard his footsteps fade before she moved. She reached under her pillow and pulled out her phone. With shaking fingers, she opened the recording app and pressed record. She slid the phone behind the lamp on the nightstand, angling it carefully toward the bed. Then she lay back down and closed her eyes. When Grant returned, his movements were different now. Faster, less patient. He didn't bother checking her pulse this time. He went straight to the drawer. Lena felt the mattress dip as he leaned over her. She smelled the faint antiseptic scent she hadn't noticed before. He sighed. "You really complicate things," he murmured. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I gave you everything," Grant continued softly. "Structure, security, a life that made sense." He paused. "And now you're starting to question it." Lena wanted to scream. She wanted to leap out of bed and run. Instead, she stayed perfectly still, every nerve screaming. "You sound like the last one," Grant said quietly. Her breath almost broke. The paranoia, the resistance. He shook his head. "I thought you'd be easier." There it was. The truth she'd been circling, finally spoken aloud. Grant's hand brushed her arm. He lifted it gently, like he was handling something fragile. Then his phone buzzed. Grant cursed under his breath, the sound sharp and angry. He stepped back, pulling the syringe away. "Not tonight," he muttered. He left the room, his footsteps heavy now. Lena lay there, shaking, tears slipping silently into her hair. The recording light on her phone blinked steadily in the dark. By morning, she had sent copies of everything. To her lawyer, to her parents' trustee, to the police tip line she found after 3 tries. She didn't wait for replies. Grant came into the kitchen like nothing had happened, humming softly as he poured himself coffee. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Yes," Lena said. He smiled. "Good." She watched him carefully, noting the tension beneath his calm. He knew something had shifted. He just didn't know how much. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "We need to talk," Noah texted. "Now." Her stomach dropped. Noah arrived an hour later, his face pale, his movements tense. He closed the door behind him and turned to her. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "Today." Lena's heart pounded. "Why?" Noah swallowed. "Because Grant isn't going to stop." Before she could ask more, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Grant appeared in the doorway, his expression dark. "Why is my brother here?" he asked. Noah froze. Grant's gaze shifted back to Lena. "What did you do?" he asked softly. "If you're enjoying the story and still here, stay with this story. Everything is about to collide. Make sure to subscribe, comment your thoughts below, and hit that like button. You never know who needs to hear this story today." The next choice Lena makes could save her life, or end it. Lena felt the room shrink the moment Grant asked the question. No one answered him. Noah stood stiff near the door, his hands clenched at his sides, his eyes darting between Lena and his brother. Grant took one slow step forward, then another, his voice calm in a way that made Lena's skin prickle. "I asked you something," Grant said. "Why are you here?" Noah cleared his throat. "I was checking on Lena." Grant's mouth curved slightly. "Checking on her, or feeding her paranoia?" Lena spoke before Noah could. "I asked him to come." Grant turned to her, surprise flickering across his face before it smoothed away. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't think I had to," she said. Grant studied her for a long moment, his eyes sharp, calculating. Then he smiled. "Of course," he said lightly. "You forget things." Something hot and angry surged in Lena's chest, but she forced it down. This wasn't the moment to lose control. Grant turned back to Noah. "You should go." Noah hesitated. "Grant!" "I said go." The word cracked like a whip. Noah's gaze flicked to Lena. For a second, she thought he might say something, anything, that would expose the truth hanging in the air. Instead, he looked away. "I'll call you," he murmured to Lena. Grant's eyes followed Noah all the way out the door. When it closed, the house fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Grant turned slowly. "What have you been telling him?" he asked. Lena met his gaze. "The truth." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what the truth is anymore." She felt fear rise, but also something steadier beneath it. "I know you're drugging me." The words hung between them. Grant didn't react right away. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't deny it. Instead, he exhaled slowly and rubbed his temple, like a man exhausted by a difficult conversation. "Lena," he said, "this is exactly what I'm talking about." "You said I sound like the last one," she pressed. "Who was she?" Grant's eyes darkened. "You misheard me." "No," Lena said. "I didn't." Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're spiraling." She shook her head. "You're lying." That did it. Grant's calm cracked, just enough for her to see what lived underneath. His voice dropped, sharp and controlled. "You need to sit down." "I don't." He reached for her arm. Lena pulled back, her heart slamming. "Don't touch me." Grant froze, then laughed softly. "See? This is what I mean." "You're scaring me," she said. "Good," he replied. The word hit her like a slap. Grant straightened, his expression smoothing again. Tonight we'll adjust your dose. You've been under-medicated. That's why this is happening." "No," Lena said, her voice shaking now. "I won't take it." Grant's eyes hardened. "You don't get to make that decision." Fear surged through her, cold and electric. Grant walked past her into the kitchen and opened a cabinet above the fridge. He reached inside and pulled out a new bottle, white, unmarked, heavier than the others. "This will help," he said calmly. Lena backed away. "Please don't." Grant stepped toward her. "You're not thinking clearly." "I am," she insisted. "You're doing this for money." That stopped him. For the first time, real emotion flashed across his face, anger, naked and sharp. "You went through my things," he said. "You stole my life," Lena shot back. Grant laughed, harsh and humorless. "I gave you a life." He leaned closer, his voice low. "Do you have any idea how much I've protected you?" "From what?" she whispered. "From yourself." The front door opened. Vivian stepped inside, her heels clicking against the floor. "What's going on?" she asked sharply. Grant turned, relief flickering briefly in his eyes. "Mom!" Vivian stopped short when she saw the bottle in his hand. Her face drained of color. "Oh no," she whispered. "You said we were past this." Lena's heart pounded. "Past what?" Vivian looked at her, then back at Grant, panic rising in her eyes. "You told me she wouldn't fight." Grant's jaw clenched. "She's confused." "No," Vivian said, her voice trembling. "This looks exactly like—" "Stop!" Grant snapped. Lena felt the room tilt. "Like who?" she demanded. Vivian covered her mouth. "You promised me the last one was an accident." Silence crashed down. Lena's breath caught. "The last one didn't leave, did she?" Grant's eyes burned into his mother. "Get out!" Vivian shook her head, tears welling. "What have you done?" Grant turned back to Lena, his mask gone now. "You weren't supposed to know." The word sent a chill through her entire body. Before he could move, Lena reached into her pocket and pressed send on her phone. Grant lunged. "What did you do?" he shouted. "I sent everything," Lena said, her voice trembling but firm. "The photos, the recordings, all of it." Grant froze, disbelief flickering across his face. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Vivian collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "You ruined everything," Grant hissed. "No," Lena said. "You did." Footsteps thundered outside, voices, authority. Grant backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving Lena. For the first time since she'd known him, fear cracked through his control. As officers burst into the house, Lena stood still, shaking but upright, her heart racing not with terror anymore, but with something like relief. The officers moved fast. Two of them grabbed Grant before he could say another word. His shock turned to fury in an instant, his voice rising as they pulled his arms behind his back. "You don't understand," he shouted. "She's sick. She's unstable." Lena flinched at the word, but she didn't look away. "She needs help," Grant continued, struggling against their grip. "Check the reports, the doctors. Everything's documented." One of the officers glanced at Lena. "Mom, are you injured?" She shook her head slowly. "Not like he wants you to think." Vivian sobbed openly now, her composure shattered. "I didn't know it went this far," she cried. "He told me she was deteriorating. He said the medication was necessary." Lena turned toward her. "You believed him." Vivian looked away. The officers escorted Grant toward the door. As they passed Lena, he twisted his head just enough to meet her eyes. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You think anyone will believe you?" Lena's voice shook, but it didn't break. "I recorded everything." Grant's face drained of color. Outside, Red and blue lights splashed across the walls of the Ridgewood estate. Neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering. Phones came out. The story was already starting to spread. Lena stood in the doorway as Grant was placed into the back of a patrol car. He shouted something unintelligible, his voice raw with rage. When the car pulled away, the silence left behind felt unreal. Inside, an officer handed Lena a card. "We'll be in touch. You did the right thing." She nodded, numb. It wasn't until they were gone that her legs finally gave out. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor, her hands shaking violently. Vivian hovered nearby, wringing her hands. "I never meant for this," she whispered. "I thought I was helping." "You were helping him," Lena said quietly. Vivian flinched. Noah appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "I tried to warn you," he said softly. Lena looked up at him. "Then why did you tell him I was scared?" Noah swallowed hard. "He's my brother." "And I was his wife," Lena replied. Noah didn't argue. That night, Lena didn't stay in the house. She packed a small bag and left before dawn, taking nothing but essentials and the phone that held her proof. The first night alone felt strange. The quiet didn't press in the way it had before. There was no one watching her swallow anything, no one checking her pulse. She slept poorly, but it was real sleep. In the days that followed, everything moved quickly. Lawyers called, investigators asked questions, old medical records were pulled and examined. The forged reports unraveled under scrutiny. The story broke. A wealthy executive arrested. Allegations of coercive control, financial manipulation, medical abuse. And then the name surfaced. A woman from years ago. Declared unstable. Declared missing. Her disappearance quietly explained away as a voluntary departure. Her family came forward. The pattern was undeniable. Lena sat in a sterile interview room when she heard the investigator say it. "You weren't the first." She closed her eyes, her chest tightening. "But you're the one who stopped him." Weeks passed. Grant's lawyers tried everything. They painted Lena as fragile, emotional, unreliable. But the recordings spoke for themselves. So did the documents. So did Vivian's testimony when she finally cracked. The trust was restored. Lena's assets returned. Control given back where it belonged. Still, the nights were hard. Sometimes Lena woke with her heart racing, convinced she could hear footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes she stared at the pill bottle of vitamins on her nightstand, just to remind herself she had a choice. One evening, as she sat alone in her small apartment, her phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Thank you," it read. No name. No explanation. Lena stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I wish I could have done it sooner." The reply came minutes later. "So do I." She set the phone down, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't come in one big moment of triumph. It came slowly, unevenly, in small choices, choosing what to eat, choosing when to sleep, choosing to trust her own memory again. Months later, Lena stood in front of a mirror in her new place, studying her reflection. Her eyes looked clearer now, not because she was stronger, but because no one was dimming them anymore. She thought back to the night she'd pretended to swallow the pill, to the fear that had nearly paralyzed her. She had believed forgetting was weakness. Now she understood something different. Forgetting had been forced. Remembering had been her rebellion. The trial didn't happen the way Lena expected. There were no dramatic outbursts in the courtroom, no sudden confessions, no cinematic breakdown. Grant sat at the defense table in tailored suits, his hair neatly combed, his expression composed. To anyone who didn't know him, He looked like a man mildly inconvenienced by a misunderstanding. That was the hardest part. Lena sat across the room and felt her hands tremble as she watched him take notes, lean in to whisper to his attorneys, nod thoughtfully as if he were discussing quarterly projections instead of his wife's life. When it was her turn to testify, the courtroom went quiet. She stood, her legs unsteady but holding, and told the truth. Not the dramatic version, not the angry version, the quiet version. She talked about the pills, the headaches, the way her world had slowly shrunk until Grant was the only voice that felt certain. She talked about the night she pretended to swallow and the moment she realized she wasn't sick. She was being erased. Grant's attorney tried to trip her up. "Isn't it possible," he asked smoothly, "that your memory lapses caused you to misunderstand your husband's intentions?" Lena looked at him steadily. "If my memory was the problem, I wouldn't have evidence." A murmur rippled through the room. They played the recordings. Grant's voice filled the courtroom, calm and chilling. "You sound like the last one. I'm not losing everything because you can't control your emotions. You won't remember this." Grant stared straight ahead as his own words echoed back at him. For the first time, his composure cracked. Lena noticed it not in his face, but in his hands, the way his fingers curled into his palm, the way his jaw tightened when the judge called for a recess. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited, their questions sharp and relentless. "How does it feel to testify against your husband?" "Did you know he'd done this before?" Lena didn't answer. She had learned the difference between silence that protects and silence that enables. This silence was hers. The verdict came weeks later. Guilty. Not on everything. Some charges would take longer, require deeper investigation. But enough. Enough to stop him. Enough to ensure he couldn't touch her life again. When the judge read the sentence, Grant finally looked at her. There was no apology in his eyes, no regret. Only disbelief. As if he couldn't understand how someone he had managed so carefully had slipped through his hands. That was fine. She didn't need him to understand. Life after Grant was quieter than Lena expected. Not empty. Just spacious. She took a job that had nothing to do with status or prestige. She rented an apartment with uneven floors and thin walls and loved it because every inch of it was hers. Some days were good. Some days were heavy. On the heavy days, she reminded herself that healing wasn't linear. It didn't mean never being afraid again. It meant knowing what fear was, and choosing anyway. One afternoon, as she sorted through old mail she'd had forwarded from Ridgewood, she found an envelope without a return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You don't know me," it read. "But I knew her. The woman before you." Lena's breath caught. "I always wondered what happened to her. They said she left. They said she was unstable. When I saw the news, I knew the truth." Her hands shook as she read on. "Thank you for being brave enough to stop him." Lena folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. She cried then, not out of fear or anger, but grief. For the woman who never got to pretend to swallow a pill. For the life that had been taken quietly, politely, without witnesses. That night, Lena lit a candle and placed it on her windowsill. She didn't say a prayer. She didn't need to. She simply acknowledged the truth. Some people don't survive monsters because the monsters never roar. They whisper. Months later, Lena sat at a small cafe, watching people pass by on the street. A woman laughed too loudly at something her friend said. A man argued gently with a barista about oat milk. Ordinary moments, unremarkable and beautiful. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Noah. "I'm sorry," it read. "I should have done more." Lena stared at it for a long time before replying. "You did what you were able to do. That's not nothing." She meant it. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant refusing to let the past decide who she became. She left the cafe and walked home slowly, breathing in the cold air, feeling the solid ground beneath her feet. She thought about how close she had come to disappearing. Not physically, mentally, quietly, respectably. And she understood something then that she wished she had known sooner. Abuse doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it looks like love with rules. Sometimes it looks like someone telling you they know your mind better than you do. If this story has made you pause, if it's made you think of someone you know or yourself, take a moment. Like the video, share it, subscribe if you want more stories like this. Awareness matters more than people realize. There's only a little left to Lena's story. Lena thought the fear would disappear once Grant was gone. It didn't. It changed. Instead of sharp panic, it became something softer and more unpredictable. A sudden tension in her shoulders when someone stood too close. A spike of adrenaline when her phone buzzed late at night. A moment of doubt when she couldn't immediately recall where she'd put her keys. On those days, the old voice tried to creep back in. "See, something's wrong with you." She learned to answer it. "No, something was done to me." That distinction mattered more than anything else. One afternoon, Lena sat in a small conference room across from a therapist recommended by her attorney. The woman listened quietly as Lena explained the pills, the gaslighting, the documents, the years of slow erosion. When Lena finished, the therapist didn't rush to speak. "What you experienced," she said carefully, "is called coercive control." Lena nodded. She had read the term already. Still, hearing it out loud made something settle inside her. "It works," the therapist continued, "because it doesn't feel dangerous at first. It feels like help." Lena let out a slow breath. "That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because if it felt like cruelty, I would have left sooner." The therapist smiled gently. "Most people would." That was the moment Lena stopped blaming herself. She began speaking at closed-door seminars arranged by her lawyer. Quiet rooms, small groups, no cameras. She told her story without dramatizing it, without turning herself into a symbol. Just facts, patterns, warning signs. Every time she spoke, someone stayed behind afterward. Someone always asked a question that began with, "What if?" What if it's happening to me? What if I'm not imagining it? What if the person who loves me is also controlling me? Lena never told them what to do. She simply said, "Pay attention to how often you're told you don't remember things." The news cycle moved on, as it always did. Other scandals replaced Grant's name. His lawyers tried to appeal. Vivian withdrew from public life completely. Lena didn't follow any of it closely. She didn't need to. One evening, as she cleaned her kitchen, Lena found the old makeup bag at the back of a drawer, the one she'd used to hide the pills. She opened it slowly. Inside was the last tablet she'd never taken. She held it between her fingers, turning it over, studying how small it was, how ordinary. For a brief moment, she considered throwing it away. Instead, she placed it in a small glass jar and set it on the shelf above her desk. Not as a reminder of fear. As proof. Proof that something tiny could almost erase her. Proof that she had noticed. Proof that pretending to swallow a pill had saved her life. Later that night, she sat by the window, the city lights glowing below. She thought about the phrase that had haunted her for months, the last one. Grant had said it so casually, like a statistic, like a completed task. Lena didn't know what had happened to the woman before her. She might never know the full truth, but she knew this. There would be no next one. Not if stories like this were told. Not if silence was broken early enough. Not if people learned to trust the quiet voice inside them before it was drowned out. Lena opened her laptop and began to write, not for publication, not for attention, just for herself. She wrote down the moments she had ignored. The first time Grant corrected her memory. The first pill she took without questioning. The first time she apologized for something she hadn't done. When she finished, she read it once, then closed the document. She didn't need to revisit it again. The power wasn't in reliving it. It was in recognizing it. Months later, Lena received a message from a woman she didn't know. I watched a story online. The message read, "It sounded like my life. I stopped taking the pills. I asked questions. I'm safe now. Thank you." Lena stared at the screen, tears filling her eyes. She typed back slowly. "You saved yourself." She meant it. The night was quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, no pills waiting on the nightstand. Just choice, just memory, just peace. The night Lena finally slept without fear came quietly. There was no dramatic moment when she realized it had happened. No sudden sense of victory. She didn't wake up feeling powerful or transformed. She simply woke up in the morning and noticed something was missing. The tension. Her chest didn't feel tight. Her jaw wasn't clenched. Her first thought wasn't, "Did I forget something?" Or, "What did I do wrong?" It was just morning. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of her apartment, warm and unguarded. She lay still for a moment, listening to the city wake up below her. Car doors, distant voices, life happening without her permission or her compliance. She smiled faintly. That afternoon, Lena walked into a pharmacy for the first time since everything ended. The place smelled the same. Clean, clinical, harmless. Rows of bottles lined the shelves, labels promising relief, rest, balance. She didn't need anything. She walked through slowly anyway, not to buy, but to reclaim the space, to prove to herself that she could stand there without her heart racing, without imagining invisible hands guiding her choices. At the checkout, the cashier smiled. "Find everything you need?" "Yes," Lena said. And for the first time, she meant it. Later that evening, she met a friend for dinner. Someone she hadn't seen much during her marriage. Someone Grant had once described as too dramatic and bad for Lena's anxiety. They laughed. They talked about ordinary things. At one point, her friend paused and looked at her carefully. "You seem different," she said. Lena considered the words. "I think I'm just present." Her friend nodded like that made sense. On the walk home, Lena passed a storefront window and caught her reflection. She stopped, really looking at herself. Not the woman she'd been trained to see, fragile, unstable, unreliable, but the one standing there now, alert, grounded, real. She thought back to the moment that changed everything. The glass of water, the pill, the decision to pretend. It hadn't been dramatic or brave. It had been quiet, small, almost nothing, and yet it had cracked the entire illusion. She wondered how many people were still swallowing pills, figuratively or literally, just to keep the peace. How many were being told they were forgetful, emotional, confused, when the truth was much darker. That thought stayed with her. So did the responsibility. Weeks later, Lena recorded a short message. No names, no accusations, just her voice, calm and steady. She talked about how control doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives whispering. It arrives offering help. It arrives convincing you that the safest thing you can do is stop trusting yourself. She ended the message with one sentence. If someone tells you your mind is broken, ask who benefits. She didn't watch it back. She didn't need to. Life continued. Grant's case moved through the system. Appeals were denied. Evidence held. The truth remained louder than his version of events. Lena didn't attend the final hearing. She was busy that day, working, living, choosing. That was her freedom. One quiet night, as she prepared for bed, Lena opened the small glass jar on her shelf. She took out the pill she had never swallowed and held it between her fingers one last time. Then she dropped it into the trash. Not because it scared her, because it no longer had any power. She turned off the lights and lay down, the room dark and peaceful. No one watched her breathe. No one waited for her to forget. As sleep came, it felt different from before. Not forced, not foggy, just rest. And somewhere in that gentle quiet, Lena understood something she wished every person could hear before it was too late. You don't have to disappear to keep someone else comfortable. You don't have to doubt your mind to prove your love. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do to a monster is stay awake. If this story held you until the end, take a moment. Like the video. Share it with someone who might need it. Subscribe if you want more stories that uncover the truth hidden behind quiet control. Because the moment we stop pretending, the truth gets loud, and no one gets erased again. Thank you for watching to the end. Until the next story, stay strong, stay hopeful, stay inspired,